following version from the children's section of a daily has many merits and is worth narrating in full. Ashwapati means owner of horses. In the days when a man's wealth was measured by the number of horses, elephants, and cattle he had, to be an Ashwapati meant to be rich. King Ashwapati was rich indeed. He was wise too, but he had no children. He and his wife practiced penance and offered sacrifices in order to get a son. They meditated on goddess Savitri. The goddess was pleased with Ashwapati's devotion, but out of the sacrificial fire came not the son he had hoped for, but a lustrous girl child. Ashwapati named her Savitri. This girl was to be the redeemer of two households, her father's as well as her father-in-law's. When Savitri grew up, so great was her beauty, wisdom, and accomplishment that no man felt himself to be her equal. So no one came to ask for her hand. Her father suggested that she could indicate her choice. "Father, why don't you let me go on a long pilgrimage?" she asked. It was a discreet way of finding eligible men, and her father agreed. Accompanied by a sober retinue, she traveled far and wide. Finally, in a forest, she saw a young man hewing wood. The luster of his body was such that she knew he was not born to that occupation. Inquiries revealed he was the son of a blind king, whose enemies had driven him out of his kingdom with his wife and infant son. The grown-up prince Satyavan was a woodcutter Savitri saw. She returned to her father and told him she had found the young man she wished to marry. At that time, sage Narad was present in the court. He was horrified at her choice. Ashwapati wondered if there were any shortcomings in the young man's character. No, Narad assured him. He has all the virtues a young man should have. What was the objection then? Narad revealed that Satyavan had only 1 year more to live. One can imagine Ashwapati's anxiety and confusion. Not only had his daughter chosen a man without wealth or power or prospects, but one without even a gift of long life. But Savitri's mind was made up. A woman gives her heart only once, she declared. The marriage took place. The royal princess went to live in the forest hut and looked after her husband and her parents-in-law with great devotion. Everyone was pleased with her, but no one realized the burden she carried in her heart. A couple of days before the appointed day of Satyavan's death, she started observing a fast. On the fateful day, weak though she was, she sought permission to accompany her husband when he went to work. In the afternoon, Satyavan suddenly took ill and lay down with his head on her lap. Ominously, the moments ticked away. Suddenly, Savitri became aware of the presence of Yama. He, whom nobody had ever seen, was visible to her because of the power of her virtue. He politely told her that her husband's time was up and dragged his soul away. Savitri followed him through the dense gloomy forests and refused to return back, though he repeatedly told her, "Child, go back. Your time has not come yet." Finally, he offered her 3 boons, but not the life of her husband. She asked for restored sight and restored kingdom for her father-in-law and heirs for her father. Yama agreed, but she still did not turn back. Yama offered one last boon for herself, as all her wishes had been for others, but not the life of her husband. She said she wished to see the happy and prosperous life of her sons. "So be it," said Yama unthinkingly. Savitri pointed out she could not have children without her husband, so Yama was strict into restoring life to Satyavan. Savitri's is a cherished name in India. Women observe fasts in her honor and pray for long life for their husbands. But as with all accomplished women in India, it is only her Pativrata aspect that gets highlighted. This does not do justice to Savitri's many-sided personality. She had the courage to be unconventional when she went out to seek her husband. She showed high-spiritedness in opposing her father's will with her son. She showed fearlessness when she met Yama. She displayed generosity and large-heartedness in the boons she asked for. She gave so much to the household in which she had spent less than a year. She was the embodiment of all that men desire for themselves when they chant the Savitri or Gayatri mantra. She personified Dhi, or higher intelligence, which in turn brings everything else: knowledge, material and transcendental, courage, fearlessness. All this Ashwapati's daughter had. After all, the element she came out of was fire. The narration is not only simple and absorbing, but is also pretty faithful, though the shades and emphasis at the time are unacceptable because of their extra textual irrelevances. In it, we immediately notice that the dharmic dignity is more of an ethical religious kind than spiritual. An element of preaching has entered in, which does not permit the revelatory truth in its dynamics to emerge. In any case, this is a much better presentation than Kamla Subramaniam's hurried assessment in her digested Mahabharata, wherein she depicts Savitri as someone who was able to outwit Yama, the god of death, by her wise talk and her devotion to her husband. Poor Yama! Nor does this make Savitri great. But why indeed ignore Savitri the Tapaswini, accomplished as she was in the yoga of meditation, Dhyana Yoga Parayana? As the seer poet tells us, people have made Savitri a social model. We may perhaps pardon Arthur MacDonald and John Dawson for this sin of theirs, but not a good well-versed Indian. But first, let us see how these Western authors give Savitri account in their brief introductions. In A History of Sanskrit Literature, MacDonald writes, "In the story of Savitri, we have one of the finest of the many ideal female characters which the older epic poetry of India has created. Savitri, daughter of Ashwapati, king of Madura, chooses as her husband Satyavan, the handsome and noble son of a blind and exiled king who dwells in forest hermitage. Though warned by the sage Narad that the prince is fated to live but a single year, she persists in her choice and after the wedding departs with her husband to his father's forest retreat. Here she lives happily till she begins to be tortured with anxiety on the approach of the fatal day. When it arrives, she follows her husband on his way to cut wood in the forest. After a time, he lies down exhausted. Yama, the god of death, appears and taking Satyavan's soul departs. As Savitri persistently follows him, Yama grants her various boons, always accepting the life of her husband, but yielding at last to her importunities. He restores the soul to the lifeless body. Satyavan recovers and lives happily for many years with his faithful Savitri. The entry into Savitri is Dawson's Hindu mythology and religion has the following relevant material. Daughter of King Ashwapati and lover of Satyavan, whom she insisted on marrying, although she was warned by a seer that he had only 1 year to live. When the fatal day arrived, Satyavan went out to cut wood, and she followed him. There he fell dying to the earth, and as she supported him, saw a figure who told her that he was Yama, the king of the dead, and that he had come for her husband's spirit. Yama carried off the spirit towards the shades, but Savitri followed him. Her devotion pleased Yama, and he offered her any boon except the life of her husband. She extorted three such boons from Yama, but still she followed him, and he was finally constrained to restore her husband to life. If Savitri had claimed back from Yama Satyavan's spirit, it seems necessary to get back from these authors the spirit of Savitri in its multifold richness given to us by Vyasa. This is particularly important if we have to live in the splendor of Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, which is at once a legend and a symbol.